Alright, in the last video I showed you how to create this grid and the concepts that we used to create it. Now what I'm going to do, let's move these references over a little bit, is I'm going to do something similar, but we're going to make more of a custom layout for this project right here. So here we're looking at a top view of a structure or building, and then I created a sectional view here so that we have an idea of what the space looked like from the top and a side view. What I'm going to do is start off with this profile right here. I'm going to copy this over and put it over here in this location because it's to the same scale. And I'm going to assume, like I did back here, that that back wall right here, which is the same as this back wall that we're seeing here, is where our picture plane is. So let's go ahead and put our picture plane line here so that we know that that's where our picture plane is. That means that this wall here and this diagonal here are going to get a little bit larger, or they're going to transform for us a little bit because of where they're located. They're not located in the same point on the picture plane. The next thing I want to do is decide where I want to be in this space. In the first example, we put ourselves right in the middle of the room. In this example here, I want to put myself maybe, let's see, well, if we put a person here, then what we're going to see, let's go ahead and put our viewing plane in there, or cone of vision in there. There's the 30 degrees in that angle and the 30 degrees in this angle. Everything outside of that cone of vision will be distorted. So you can see that we're going to see into that room nicely, and also if we move ourselves back as far as we can from that cone of vision, we're going to be able to see this room and that room pretty well, or this space over here. If we move ourselves over to this side a little bit more, that side of the room is going to get really distorted. We may not see it very well, but we're going to be able to see this side here. It's going to stay less distorted. This wall over here too is going to be really foreshortened, and this wall over here we're going to see a little bit more clearly. So depending on where we put ourselves does change what we end up with for a final result. I'm going to put myself just a little bit off center so that my center of vision, draw that line in there, is right about there. Okay, so that puts that same point so that that center of vision is right about here in this elevation. So that means that's putting us standing right here. The height of this person, this is the floor line right here, will be around 5 feet. Let's put ourselves at 5 feet this time. And this becomes our horizon line. So let's put that on the horizon line layer. And then we're using the viewpoint layer, we're going to type in point to put in a point right there, and then I can get rid of this center line. Alright, now as before, just like before, we drew all of our lines coming from that vanishing point through each corner of the room. We're going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to switch to my edge layer, type in ray, and then from this vanishing point I'm going to go through each one of the inside edge corners of the room. Right, now just to make this a little bit more clear, I'm going to get rid of the hatch pattern, and I'm going to get rid of this outside line because we're not going to really see that. So there's the space that we're defining. I'm just going to keep a reference there for those windows though, because we're going to want to know where those are in a minute. Alright, so these become our walls. And if we trim to these boundary edges like we did before, we would actually want this space to go out beyond this point, and what's going on here is, let's put that ray back in there. If we go from here through that point, you see that this line in the back is actually the same line that I have here in the foreground. So what's going to happen here is we're not going to be able to see the ceiling height in that space beyond in the other room. So I'm just going to trim those edges so that that's right there is representing the soffit kind of that's over this space here, whereas we can't see that corner up there. So now we're starting to see the space as an actual space. Let's check to see how far back we are in this building. I want to do a distance from the inside edge to about where we are in the building, and we're about at 30 feet. I'm going to round that up to 30 feet. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to copy that point 30 feet over, and that gives me a vanishing point, or actually I should say a diagonal measuring point. Now that diagonal measuring point shouldn't go through this surface, because remember this surface we're going to end up having to make an adjustment here, because this right now looks like that this is all on one plane. But remember that this surface here is actually in front of this plane here by this distance, 8 feet. So that's going to end up being pulled forward, and we're going to make that adjustment after we do this diagonal measuring point. So this is at 30 feet. To get that 30 feet to be laid out properly depth-wise within the floor area, I want it to go through this corner here, not this one. So I'm going to use the line command, ray actually, go from this diagonal measuring point through this corner, and where it crosses this edge is going to be approximately where our viewer is standing. It looks like we're running out of a little bit of space here, running into our reference drawings. So let's move our reference drawings over a bit. There. Okay, so this is about where 30 feet is in the building. Let's trim that to the right spot. And so that's where we are standing, and that's what we're seeing beyond. Now what we need to do is measure the bottom line here like we did before. So we want to take this line here, from here to here. So I'm going to trim away everything else so that that line is just from there to there. We're going to add the other lines in there as individual lines, so I can use that line to just divide it or measure. I'll measure that line out so I have 1 foot increments or 12-inch increments. We're using the ray command again. Doesn't look like that's 12-inch increments, and that's why. Let's get rid of that. Try that again. It looks like we have the wrong dimension there. So that should go to there, and it should be to this line. That's my problem. Now let's list it and make sure it's right. 15 feet, that makes more sense. Okay, so we want to divide this or measure it so that we have a line, a point every 12 inches. So now that's laying across the line evenly. So if we use ray again, let's trim these reference lines out here. So we use ray again and go from the node through each one of these nodes here, from the vanishing point rather through each one of these nodes. Whoops, missed the spot there, so we want to get rid of that. All right, so this now is representing a correct depth for the space. So this is 30 feet back here where it's running into this line, and if we use the X line command, horizontal, we have, I'll explain here where we are feet wise back here and why we don't have any more in between the 30-foot mark and where we're at back here. We only have 15 feet showing here, so we're only going to have 15 horizontal lines coming towards us. We have another 15 feet here that we don't have accounted for because we don't have another 15 lines going in either direction to lay those out. So if we put another 15 lines going in this direction, then we'd have enough information for us to get all the way out to here. So let's trim these lines back. Alright, so now what I've got is, I've got a grid, an accurate grid. Well, I trimmed one too many lines here. So put this one back in, goes through that corner, and extend all those lines. Alright, we have an accurate layout for the floor plan. For the floor, this is a 1 foot square right here, so if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 feet out, that right there is where the lower edge of the floor for this wall here should be. So if we project all of those lines forward, I want to use ray to go from this point through the door frame, the door edge, the door frame, the door edge. The same thing up here. And we should see that same door here in the foreground. Go right across to the door frame, down, there's the door edge. And you see how this door has gotten bigger because it's more forward. So we can get rid of that information now. We can obviously add that extra detail. And we can get rid of this diagonal line so that we can see what we're doing. And all of these lines here that are here as reference we can get rid of as well. So this becomes the edge of the wall. And we want to get rid of that line. So what I've essentially done is moved our door and our wall up so that it's in the correct position based on the floor plan. Now the other thing we got to take a look at is that this wall here is 8 feet in front of this wall, and we've got that drawn accurately now. We can actually get rid of all these reference lines so we don't get confused. But when you look at the plan, there is a soffit, or there's like a little doorway here that's going to block our view a little bit, and it sticks out into this space here. So this is at 8 feet. Let's find out what this distance is at. That's another 4 feet. So I want to measure 4 feet from this line here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to have the edge of a wall here. And that edge of a wall should line up with this edge. I'm going to go across. I'm going to go through go through the bottom edge of this building, this corner right here that we started off with, and then I can go across until I intersect that and go right up to that line, and now we've got the wall edge. So we wouldn't be able to see anything beyond this point in that space beyond. There should be another line here, and I should have, and what I'm going to do is see this point that's been created by me drawing a horizontal line here. I'm going to use the ray command to go from that node through that point, and that's going to show how much of that soffit over that opening we're going to see. So now we would get rid of this line here. We don't need that line, and we certainly don't need those lines anymore. So now we've got this space here in the foreground, background rather, the back wall that we drew to actual size back here. Then we go forward. It ended up being 12 feet to this opening edge, and then we're able to see the doors beyond that are the same doors as these. They should be larger because they're closer to us. They're actually 8 feet closer to us to define that space. Now what I can do is that I can extend these lines over into that space, and that helps me to lay out the the grid lines on that floor. Now the grid lines coming from the vanishing point still need to be laid out based on this back measuring line. So if I really wanted to do this accurately, I'd have to extend this line to wherever the edge of the wall would be based on where I draw this ray from and to. So if I connect back to that corner and extend that line to here, and then continue to copy these nodes every 12 inches. Now I have additional points that I can use to lay out the grid in the space in the adjacent room. So we use ray to go from the node through each one of these nodes here. And then I'm going to use this edge here to trim from there to there, because I don't really need to see any more of that space. Whoop. Actually want to trim here and here and here. And that will help things to be less confusing if you do it that way. So we're going to trim around this wall here. We don't need to see any of those grid lines beyond. We don't need to see any of these grid lines here. So we'll just erase these. So there's the floor kind of disappearing behind the wall there. And we do the same thing on this side if we continue to copy those nodes all across the bottom of the floor, 12-inch increments, and we draw a line, a ray, from each one of those points. And then continue these horizontal lines so they go across to the other side. Now we've got our floor defined for this space. If we wanted to continue to add more horizontal lines here in this direction, we would need to continue this grid all the way through so that we are able to count up 30 feet from this point. Once we're able to do that, wherever our diagonal line went through, we had it go through here. We need to have 30 feet going across in this direction and to have a continuation of a floor grid temporarily until we can get our horizon lines out here, our horizontal lines out here. I actually think, though, this is about as much as I want to show of this space, so I would just not draw any more of those lines if I didn't think it was necessary. Alright, in the next video what I'm going to do is demonstrate how you can start putting in these doors and windows by using the grid. You don't necessarily have to draw the grid everywhere, it's just a matter of transferring the points. So take a look at the one-point perspective step 3 to see that demonstration.